Hey everyone, welcome to this walkthrough of Hollywood Pop Brass by EastWest and Quantum Leap. I'm Josh Carney and I'll be your host for this video. Hollywood Pop Brass was produced by Doug Rogers and Nick Phoenix, and it was recorded and engineered by multiple Grammy Award-winning engineer and producer Mugi Canazio. He's known for working with industry icons like Ray Charles, Sergio Mendes, Diana Ross, Michael Bublé, and more. Hollywood Pop Brass features a 4-piece brass ensemble for all of the main articulations, so that includes 2 trumpets, a trombone, and a saxophone that alternates between a baritone, tenor, and alto sax, depending on the note range, and a 5-piece ensemble for all of the phrases and licks that includes 2 trumpets, a trombone, and 2 saxophones that alternate between bari, tenor, and alto sax, depending on the instrument voicing. With Hollywood Pop Brass, you have the massive sound of pop, Latin, and funk brass styles right at your fingertips. And this includes pretty much every playing style imaginable: sustained tones, legato style for melodic passages, crescendos, diminuendos, staccato, marcato, and even effects like falls, growls, rips, and trills. There's also dozens of different instrument licks and phrases, all at a key press, multi-sampled at different keys. So let's get right into this with a musical example. So for that example, I used multiple different articulations, playing styles, and phrases, all on just a few software instruments in my DAW. So first, let's break down each of the 8 folders that you'll see when you load up Hollywood Pop Brass, and each of the patches and articulations contained within. The sustain folder contains several different types of sustained articulations, many of which are velocity sensitive. So the most basic one is this HPB sus patch, which is just a basic sustained patch with 3 different velocity layers. There's also 3 different crescendo patches: fast, medium, and long. These are also velocity sensitive. Staccato sustain has a harder accent on the front end of sustain tones. And the sustained crescendo and diminuendo patches swell in and fade out. The X-fade versions of these instruments use the modulation wheel to cross-fade between dynamics. So here the modulation wheel is going to control the dynamics, not the velocity. The short folder contains several short, staccato-type articulations. Because these are often used in repetition, each of the patches is actually a multi-sampled round-robin set. This means that the samples are alternated for a more realistic effect. So RR times 4 means that a patch has 4 alternating samples, and RR times 8 means that the patch has 8 alternating samples. These are velocity sensitive as well. The first one is marcato style, which is like a long staccato style. Next are short stabs, which are longer than typical staccato style and have a more intentional blatty front end tone. The staccato patches come in 4 times and 8 times round robin variants. These are the shortest in length. And lastly is the staccato repeat patch, which plays 4 beats of repeated 16th notes. The effects folder contains different special playing styles like falls, growls, rips, and trills. Many of these are multi-sampled round-robin instruments as well. There's 3 different falls: long, medium, and short. A growl articulation. There's 3 different rips. The first one rips up to the note that you press, while the second 2 are long and short rips that start on the note that you press and rip up. And lastly, a trill articulation. I layered the trills in at certain points with the stabs articulation in the melody of the example I played earlier. The Legato folder contains patches that can be played in a smooth melodic fashion. All of the patches labeled VS are velocity sensitive, and the ones labeled X fade use the modulation wheel to crossfade the dynamics. A fast legato that has a quicker legato transition, so this is better for faster passages. A smooth legato patch that's better for slower passages. And then there's staccato versions of these as well, where the front end has an accent on it. So when you play legato style with the notes connected, the front accent goes away, but if you release the note and re-trigger the note, the accent comes back. So this is really helpful if you're trying to play in a passage that has some legato and some staccato elements. The mod combo folder contains instruments that combine multiple articulations and uses the modulation wheel to switch between them. So for example, the first patch, Crescendo Mod, has the short, medium, and long crescendo samples, as well as a no crescendo sample, split up on 4 zones on the modulation wheel. The Shorts mod patch has shorter articulations with the mod wheel down and longer articulations as you move the mod wheel up. The Phrases folder contains different pre-recorded phrases with the whole horn group, recorded at different keys and voicings. The 3-digit number right after the phrase number designates the tempo the phrase was recorded at. The Licks folder contains several shorter phrases. They're all round-robin alternating, so this really makes them hyper-realistic if you use them repeatedly. These were all recorded at 120 BPM, and the modulation wheel controls the chord voicing for each lick. And the last folder, the key switch folder, combines almost all of these articulations into 5 key switch instruments. So I'll start with this effects key switch patch. If you don't know what key switching is, this allows you to switch between different sample sets with a key switch trigger. So these blue notes down here are the key switches, and they allow me to switch between different effects articulations. So essentially, all of the articulations in the effects folder are now contained within this single key switch instrument, and you can switch between them with a key press, a mouse press, or by triggering the key switch note in your MIDI editor. Some of these key switch instruments can be really complex. For example, the licks key switch gives you all 17 licks in the original licks folder. They're still round robin alternated, and the chord voicing can still be adjusted with the modulation wheel. The phrases are separated into two separate key switch patches. In my original musical example, I used one of the phrases key switch patches to string together multiple different phrases all on a single track in my DAW. I used the piano roll editor to enter in both the pitch for each phrase, but also the key switch trigger note. And then there's a single key switch instrument for all of the sustained and short articulations. I find this patch incredibly helpful for composing hyper-realistic original horn parts without having to break up the horn parts on different articulation tracks. Here you can have all of the main articulations on a single instrument track and switch between them with your key switches. So that wraps up the different instrument patches in Hollywood Pop Brass. Next, let's take a look at the player window. In the articulation area, you can see the type of articulations loaded for a particular instrument. You can deactivate unused key switches, and you can even unload these from memory to save RAM if you like. You've got your main volume fader, meter, and pan control here. You can adjust the coarse or fine tuning for the entire instrument here. So coarse tuning adjusts it in semitones, and fine-tuning adjusts it in cents. There's 5 different channel sources to pick from. You can work in stereo, you can sum to mono, you can isolate just the left or right channels in mono, or you can swap the left and right channels. There's a built-in stereo double effect as well if you want even more width. Here you can choose one of several different convolution reverb types, and you can adjust the pre-delay and volume of the reverb. The mixes area allows you to blend the mix of the trumpets, trombone, sax, room, and surround mics. Instruments in the phrases and licks categories have sections 1 and 2 recorded as separate, unique performances, panned hard left and hard right, with the mid, room, and surround microphones containing a mix of these takes, resulting in a big, wide stereo image. And the envelope area is a global volume envelope. So if you want a bit of a softer attack, you can roll up the attack time a bit. And if you want the notes to last longer after you release the key, you can just pull up the release time a bit as well. The tempo sync option allows you to lock certain instruments to your DAW's tempo. With the phrases and licks instruments, as well as the staccato repetitions instrument in the shorts category, tempo sync is enabled by default because these instruments have performances that were recorded at various different rhythms and tempos. For example, this phrase instrument was originally recorded at 120 BPM. So right now I have my session tempo set to 120 BPM, and the timing of the phrase matches the timing of my session tempo. I'll turn on the metronome so you can hear this on beat. So with tempo sync enabled, I can change the tempo and the instrument will follow the session tempo. Let's say that my tempo is in halftime, so 60 BPM from the original 120 BPM. Now the instrument is going to play back extremely slow. So let's say that I want the phrase to play back 2 times as fast as it's playing now. There's a scale option where you can choose half time, single time, or double time playback speed. I'll choose double time for this, and the phrase will play back at the original tempo of 120, even though the session tempo is 60 BPM. Likewise, if you're working at a much faster tempo, this can cause the phrase to sound a bit rushed. Here you can use the halftime scale option. Even though Hollywood Pop Brass was recorded as an ensemble instrument, you can still bring out and isolate desired instruments in your horn lines, here in the mixer or in the player view. Here's an example with all of the instruments in. Now maybe I want to cut most of the trumpet and just isolate the trombone and sax voices. I'll do this by pulling down the trumpet channel, and to further reduce bleed from the trumpet, I'll pull down the room and surround channels as well. You can also mute or solo any of the channels if you want to isolate any instruments further. Let's just hear the trombone. Now, because these were recorded as an ensemble, you'll still hear a little bit of bleed from the other instruments, but in context of an entire song, this can work great for bringing out solo passages. Let's solo the trumpet and pull it up an octave. And if you use an instrument in the phrases or licks categories, this changes to section 1, section 2, mid, room, and surround here in the mixer as well. If you click the effects button here, this will take you to another window where you can add additional effects like amp simulation, distortion, an SSL style EQ, delay, an automatic double tracking effect, and you can adjust the reverb from here as well, and add an SSL bus compressor. So that's a walkthrough of the Hollywood Pop Brass instrument from EastWest. It is the most hyper-realistic pop and Latin brass software instrument ever.